All right. Well, we are so grateful to Emily. She is do you go by nutritionist? What do you like to call yourself?
I say holistic nutritionist.
Perfect. So she has a Master of Science in Nutrition from the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon. She's extended her knowledge base and credentials to include a certificate as an autoimmune paleo protocol certified coach. So she's very certified to help us today. Um, I don't know, Emily, is there anything else you wanted everyone to know about you before we get started? You were a teacher in special needs classrooms for 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I taught all levels and all abilities actually too. Yeah.
That's perfect. So Emily is very qualified to help us out today. We're going to wait to do questions until the end. So if you could save your questions, and then we'll just let Emily get started. Thank you, Emily.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so let me, yeah, I mean, I think Camille did a great job of just kind of letting you know kind of what my education and background is. It's working with people and families with children with special needs is definitely a passion of mine. And it's actually where I became interested in nutrition. I was teaching in an elementary school and was not very impressed with what was being served in the cafeteria. And I just started doing my own research and reading a lot and just getting really interested in it myself. I happened to be vegetarian at the time, thought I was healthy. Um, and I've made some changes, but yeah, that's kind of where it started, was in the classroom as a special education teacher. So I'm excited to be here. And yeah, well, if there are other questions about me, then we can talk about it later, but let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see, so, and hopefully technology is serving me well. Can everybody see
Yes.
PowerPoint? Okay. I did it right. So what I'm talking about today is gut health. And I'm talking about it because, in my opinion, it's at the heart of um, most of the problems that we have, even with our health, not just digestive disorders, but it's at the heart of, for example, mental health, immune function, skin issues, food sensitivities and allergies. And in this group, it can also be at the heart of behaviors that students might not be able to communicate. So all of those things, the health of your gut really does matter. And so it's something that I work with all my patients, even if that's not what they're coming to me specifically for. It usually ties back to the gut. So that's what we're talking about today. So just to kind of give you an overview, so I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the bacteria in our gut and how it relates to our health. I'm going to give you some recommendations for what you can do in your diet. And just so you know, that this is a very simplified kind of discussion that I'm presenting today. There's so much that we could talk about, but hopefully I'm presenting it in a way that is understandable, and that you can take something from it and know what you can change or do about it. And then we'll end with some questions. Um, so just to kind of start off, understanding what we're talking about, maybe you've heard these words before, maybe you haven't, but when we're talking about gut health, we are talking about your microbiome, your microbiota, gut flora. You might have heard microflora. Those terms are out there, and so I just kind of put them up there. So if you've heard them before, you'll know what they mean. So your microbiome is the genetic makeup of all of the different microorganisms in your gut. The microbiota are the actual organisms. Gut flora, microflora, they're essentially the same as a microbiota. So no real difference there, but just so you maybe have just a, like I say, a very basic understanding of what we're talking about, because I'm going to be using those words. So the types of organisms, the microbiota that are in your gut, we're talking about bacteria, we're talking about archaea, fungi, viruses, all of those to some degree are normal and natural to have in your gut. It's when there's either not enough of the good bacteria, too much of the bad bacteria, also viruses, right? It's like when there's an overgrowth or not enough, it's that imbalance that's when things go wrong. So all of those types of things, pretty normal to find in someone's digestive tract. There are, I forget the number off the top of my head, and it's probably, it changes too, but there's something like several hundred trillion bacteria in our body. 90% of that is in our gut, in our digestive tract. And then the rest of it is kind of dispersed throughout some of those areas that you see. So there's bacteria on our skin. Our skin is the largest organ, and it's the second place that you'll find the most bacteria on our body. You'll find bacteria in your mouth, in your nose, your ears, eyes, genitals, and respiratory tract. And so the colors that you see there are the different types of bacteria that you'll find throughout the body, and everybody's a little bit different. So perfectly normal, natural, and you want it. You want bacteria. We'll talk about why. So some of the functions of the microbiome, and again, that's the genetic material of the microorganisms. So all of those different microorganisms, they will regulate your immune system. They prevent the growth and overgrowth of the harmful microorganisms. So you've maybe heard that there's bad bacteria, there's good bacteria too. And like I was saying, it's really when you have that imbalance that things go wrong. And so the good bacteria prevent overgrowth and sometimes growth of different microorganisms. They also ferment the fiber that we eat, the indigestible fiber, so the insoluble fiber. They produce nutrients. So maybe you've heard of K2. They produce various B vitamins and then short chain fatty acids. And all of those things, all of those nutrients are necessary for digestion and absorption. And so again, if there's not enough of those things and not enough short chain fatty acids, not enough B vitamins, then things go wrong. And then they also influence your hormone and neurotransmitter production. So some of you might be aware, what is the number? It's somewhere between 80 and 90% of our neurotransmitters are produced in our gut. So that equates to our mental health, to brain health. Our neurotransmitters regulate that. So I've talked a little bit about some of the consequences when there's that imbalance, when there's an altered microbiome. So our immune system is impaired. It doesn't function as well. Oftentimes people who have gut dysbiosis is what we call it. They're sick a lot. That's one kind of sign that something might be wrong. There is increased inflammation. faster aging as far as like the organs and body function go. And then I spoke just a second ago briefly about how our neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. And so if we're not producing as many, then brain function is also impaired. So that could mean things like depression and anxiety, OCD, all of those kinds of things are aggravated. It could also mean symptoms like brain fog and things like that. So just touching for a minute on the connection between the gut bacteria and the brain. So our gut impacts brain function, as does stress. So chronic stress especially, which we all have, it's just kind of how I feel like most of us live. And so that's definitely something that impacts our gut health. And so this visual, I'm just kind of showing you, there really is a very direct connection between our gut and our brain, and it's called the gut-brain axis. So the brain influences our gut microbiota. I talked a little bit about stress. Chronic stress will deplete the lining in the gut. It can create inflammation. Things don't move as well. And if you kind of think of like, this is just something I talk with patients about too, is if somebody struggles with anxiety, or even if I'm just trying to get someone to, if I'm working on like mindful eating, so paying a little bit more attention to your food and the experience when you're eating, just that alone will relax someone enough if they're having digestive issues with movement, right? With sometimes even acid reflux. So if someone's having issues with acid reflux, or food's just not quite moving as it should, that could be like constipation, it could be other kinds of things that go wrong, like your ileocecal valve, but really just like your fight or flight, relaxing and trying to, you know, breathe and focus on your food. Sometimes that alone will help people with some of those digestive symptoms. So yeah, I mean, if you can kind of think of your body response when you're stressed, it's not because of that instinctual fight or flight response. If we're chasing a tiger, right, that's our flight, we're not worried about digesting. We're not worried about all of those extra things. This is life or death. And it's the same thing. When we're stressed, we're in that fight or flight, and other things in our body are just not working the way they should. And if we're chronically stressed, that just impacts it all that much more. And then, so kind of, you know, in reverse, so our gut microbiota, if there's an imbalance with the good and bad bacteria, that influences our brain and our brain function, brain health, because again, our neurotransmitters are produced in the gut, and if there aren't enough, they're not good quality, vitamins and minerals aren't being absorbed, our brain suffers. So this, so when we're talking about like the bacteria, the makeup of somebody's gut, somebody's microbiome, so there's lots of different factors that go into that. So if you think back, let me just go back actually. The different colors, remember, represent different types of bacteria. The more variety and diversity of bacterial strains, the better. But what I said earlier is that everybody's going to be different. So the different colors here are the different bacteria. we took me side by side, even like my sister, we would be very different. The types of bacteria that are found in our gut would be different. And it's dependent on these things. So it starts at birth, and it, whether you were born naturally, so a vaginal birth versus a C-section, it's a very different experience, and for lots of reasons, but one of them as it relates to this is that a C-section birth, you don't get all of the exposure to the bacteria in the mother's body that you would with a vaginal birth. So how you were born, whether or not you were breastfed versus formula. Again, we were made, when we have children, right, it's a very natural process, and it happens for reasons. And so the vaginal birth, breastfeeding versus formula, all of those things are meant to set the baby up for proper immune function. And so that includes like the bacteria that they're exposed to. The makeup of breast milk is so different than formula, and it's not something that we can reproduce. But so those two things depend on what types of bacteria you're exposed to, as well as how much bacteria is in your specific body. Your diet, where you live geographically. So somebody in Utah and somebody who lives in Japan, the types of bacteria that they're exposed to in their environment is very different, and so that impacts it as well. Medication use, antibiotics, those both have an effect on the types of bacteria that are in your system, as well as how much, the quantity. How old you are. So older adults have far fewer types of bacteria than younger people do. Whether or not you have been exposed to disease, and how active you are. All of those things, and still other things, all play into how healthy your gut is. So you may have heard, I'm just going to touch on this pretty briefly, but some of you may have heard the term leaky gut. So some of those same reasons that we talked about that impact the health of your gut, are impacting if it's unhealthy. So leaky gut, I feel like it's kind of becoming more and more popular. A lot of people have at least heard of that term. And what it means really is that there has been a degradation in the cell lining of your digestive tract, and you can kind of see at the bottom there the arrows where some of those bacteria, food, if you're on a medication, any and all of those different things that are meant to stay in your digestive tract are literally leaking through into your bloodstream. So leaky gut essentially means holes develop in the lining of your gut where things are leaking through. That causes all sorts of problems, and without going into too much detail, like you can see a little bit there, so if we take the example of food, so if a food particle gets outside of the digestive tract into the bloodstream, oftentimes, so you can kind of see there that it's called immune activation. So your immune system is activated. Those food particles are meant to stay in your digestive tract, and so when they're leaked out, your immune system is recognizing them as foreign and is mounting up a response, and so they're activated. So oftentimes leaky gut, one of the first signs that someone might have it is that they're all of a sudden sensitive to or allergic to foods that they'd never have been before. So in all sorts of ways, your immune system is activated. So if you can kind of imagine all those other things that go through our digestive system, not just food, if they leak out, that's a problem. So there are, we talked about diet is one of the things that affects the health of your gut and your microbiome. And so diet in a couple of ways impacts it. So when there have been several studies that when somebody changes their diet, say from a standard American to plant-based, let's say, your microbiome is very adaptable, and you can see the change in just 24 hours in, again, like the types of bacteria and how much. So those are the two important pieces. So your body responds really quickly, and it adapts. And when you do right by it and you feed it right and you're reducing your stress and you're reducing medications as much as possible and you're moving and right, all of those components, it responds and quickly. The diet kind of similarly, I guess, is it in that it's adaptable. Like the impact of your diet is really, it's major. It's foundational, and yet it's so hard to change for people. But hopefully we talk about something you feel like you can do today. But yeah, your diet has such a big impact on the health of your gut. Quality makes a big difference, the quality of your diet. So again, lots of studies that have shown a poor diet, meaning it's lots of things, but if I'm defining a poor diet, I guess I would say not enough fiber, not enough fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are where you're getting your vitamins and minerals from, and so typically people are deficient. So there's a lot of nutritional deficiencies is what I'm defining as a poor diet. Too much omega-6 fat, maybe even too much protein, right? Like that's what I would say is a poor diet. Simple carbohydrates, that kind of a thing. So when we eat a high quality diet, so high quality protein, emphasis on plants, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, seeds, all of those things, that's what feeds the good bacteria. That's what helps us develop good gut health. So some of the really kind of basic and important things that improve your microbiome with food specifically is fiber, polyphenols, which are polyphenols and antioxidants are similar. Polyphenols is a compound of antioxidants, and we can define that more if we need. Probiotics, and then anti-inflammatory in nature. So those kind of four basic things with your food are what's important to improve your microbiome. So fiber. I feel like when I talk about fiber with people, everybody thinks about like Metamucil or something, and that's not what I'm talking about. So fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, that's fiber. And there's two different types. It's not, I don't know that it's super important that you know the difference, but I'll just kind of go over it really briefly. So there's soluble and insoluble, and probably you've heard of those two words. Soluble means that it's fermentable. Soluble also means that it dissolves in water. Insoluble is non-fermentable, and you need both. So the soluble is what adds bulk to your stool, and the insoluble is what moves it through. You need both. So this picture on the right is a pretty good example of some good fiber. So where kind of the anti-inflammatory and polyphenols, antioxidants, they do kind of all go together because they're working on a lot of the same things, which is inflammation. And so we talked just a second ago about how inflammation is one of the major things that leads to gut dysbiosis or leaky gut. And so it's something that really most people need to work on. You don't want a lot of inflammation, less is definitely more. So kind of like chronic stress is really where the problem comes in. Chronic inflammation is where the problem is here too. So if you think about inflammation, you just kind of define it for a second. It's a natural, normal response from the immune system when we are injured, right? If you think about if you get a cut on your finger, your immune system very quickly mounts a response, and there's a cascade of processes that happen. Inflammation is one, right? So what happens when something gets inflamed? It's red, there's maybe some pus, it's hot. All of those things are good and help that cut on your finger heal. So with acute inflammation is what it's called, there is a very definite beginning and an end. Your finger, the cut on your finger heals in maybe, I don't know, 3 to 5 days. So the problem with chronic inflammation, there might be a defined beginning. Oftentimes I'm not sure that there is, and there's definitely not an end. So that's where the problem is. It doesn't resolve, it just keeps, internally your body is just inflamed all the time, and that leads really to all of the disease can be linked back to inflammation. So it's definitely something we want to work on. Polyphenols, like I say, they're a compound within an antioxidant. An antioxidant is something that fights free radicals in our body, which we produce and we're exposed to on a daily basis, just living and breathing and being exposed to all sorts of different things in our environment. Antioxidants are what we need to be able to fight them. So polyphenols are just kind of a part of that. Probiotics. Most people have heard of probiotics. Some people, you may have heard of prebiotics. Again, you need both. So a probiotic is the actual bacteria, and a prebiotic is the food for the bacteria. Probiotics, so you can take a supplement, right? And a lot of people do. But if we're introducing live bacteria into our bodies through food, there's ways that we can do that too without a supplement. So things like fermented vegetables, so sauerkraut, kimchi. I feel like it's becoming a little bit more popular and mainstream now, so you can find all sorts of fermented vegetables in the grocery store. One of my favorites is beets. There's also fermented soy products, tempeh. You'll see in grocery stores too things like kombucha. A lot of people think automatically about yogurt. Not all yogurt has bacteria in it. If it does, it will say on the container live bacteria. But so those are just a couple examples of introducing probiotics into your diet naturally. And then the prebiotics, like I say, they are the food for the bacteria, and it's fiber. That's essentially what the bacteria feed on. Since we're talking about foods to focus on, it's good to talk about the kinds of foods that you might want to avoid. So I think it's pretty well known, but I teach classes on these sorts of things all the time, and you know, I do think that people know the term artificial sweeteners, that you should stay away from them. Um, but most people don't know where artificial sweeteners are in some of those products that you might buy at the grocery store. So anytime something says like a fruit juice, a lemonade, a Gatorade, if it says 0 sugar and you're thinking you're doing a great thing, it's got artificial sweetener in it. And that's worse than regular sugar. It's artificial, our bodies don't know what to do with it, and there's been all kinds of research linking it. No causal, there's no research that says artificial sweeteners cause cancer. There's plenty of research that says it's correlated with cancer, all sorts of different types of cancer. So yeah, definitely look for that. So 0 sugar is usually what something will say on it, and there's an artificial sweetener in there. Processed and fried foods, oftentimes, so they have additives, chemicals, preservatives. Fried foods are typically fried in processed vegetable oils. Not many good things I can say about any of those kinds of foods. Vegetable oils, very processed, not good for you. So the good oils, the good fats would be things like olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, lard, butter, any of those clean products. And then processed and refined sugars and flours. So that's white sugars and white flours. Again, like lots of different additives, chemicals, preservatives. You know, I really like, I don't know if anybody has heard of or read Michael Pollan, but I really love his work. And one of his sayings is, if your grandmother doesn't recognize it as food, then that's, you know, that's a sign that you shouldn't eat it. And I kind of feel like that, right? Like foods that, if we can't recognize where it came from in the ground, then it's gone too far. So I'm just going to give you some ideas, some specific ideas for meals and snacks. When I say balanced, this is something that I talk about a lot in my classes. What I'm talking about is your macronutrient distribution. So making sure you've got protein, fat, and fiber. Those are definitely the basics. You definitely want all of those components in any meal, any snack. It doesn't have to be animal-based protein, but you want to make sure that you've got protein, fat, and fiber. And I say fiber, not a carbohydrate, because I'm specifically trying to emphasize vegetables, fruits and vegetables, and whole grains. If I say carbohydrate, I feel like people think about pasta and bread. So fiber. And if you'll recall, like we need fiber for a healthy gut. So there is, I was going to say, like, there's not, like, you don't have to get super specific about how much of each, other than you don't need a lot of fat, right? So that's kind of the least amount, 5 to 10% in each meal and snack. Protein is 20% or so, and so 70% should be fiber, right? Like you're looking at a plate and you have a palm-sized piece of protein. Doesn't have to, I was gonna say, how would I describe that if it were plant-based? I don't know, a palm-sized portion, I guess, of protein, a little bit of fat, so that could be half an avocado, that could be you've sauteed the vegetables in olive oil, and then the rest of the plate should be leafy greens and all sorts of different vegetables. That's what your plate should look like. So I remember as a teacher, I think most of the students that I worked with, they went to the cafeteria, they did school lunch. But I remember food was always an issue. So some of the challenges I remember, and you can kind of talk about it too if we've got time, but sensory issues, I know those might be, you know, something that you're thinking about. Convenience, always. You need something to be quick and easy. Maybe you are eliminating foods, and so you've got kind of maybe a narrow group of foods to work with, and kids not wanting to feel different. Those were just some of the challenges that I remember. And if we have time, and if people are interested, we can talk more about this, but just kind of some basic things I would recommend, some ideas. If you're sending a lunch with your child, and it is different, some things you might be able to think about and do is adding a favorite food. Hopefully there's a healthy version of their favorite food. So adding in something like that, adding in a surprise. I'm giving you just a couple examples: writing a note, a sticker, a baseball card, just something fun to make the experience positive. Engage them in the process. That's good regardless of abilities or tastes or whatever, right? Like involve and engage kids in the process, in cooking, learning about food, where it comes from, how to prepare it, what things taste like. The more they participate, the more interested they are and willing to try. And just try to build, you know, like a 3 to 5 basic lunches that work. And then, you know, you can slowly change things up, add things, but work to get 3 to 5 basic lunches. So this is just one idea. This would be, and again, if people are interested and want to talk more about like eliminating foods, we can, but these would all be gluten-free, dairy-free ideas. So chicken strips, a barbecue dipping sauce, some steamed or raw veggies, and then a fruity salsa would be a balanced lunch. Another idea, like deli turkey roll-ups. You could do hummus inside those. You could do a pesto with some veggies, like a dairy-free potato salad and apple slices and peanut butter. So another idea for gluten-free, dairy-free meals. Just a couple other ideas: banana blueberry pancakes, a carrot tomato soup, coconut shrimp and salsa. Again, dairy-free, gluten-free, all of those options. There are plenty of options of foods that if you're avoiding things for different reasons, it's definitely doable. So I think, okay, just to recap, yeah, I was gonna say, I think that was all I planned to present. So yeah, just to recap, why is it important to think about or explore your gut health? Some of the main reasons would be improving immune function, improving your mental health or your brain function, reducing inflammation and preventing disease. Those are all really major health benefits by improving your gut and improving your diet specifically. So I will stop sharing and turn it back over for questions.
Thanks, Emily. I'm going to start off with a question from Julie, who's not with us today. One of her questions was, she had a couple. So the first part of the question is, do you know why the children with special needs have a higher tendency to have gluten intolerance or lactose intolerance, those kind of things?
It's a good question. And I mean, it's a kind of a complicated answer, I suppose, because um, we know, I mean, so some of it goes back to the things I talked about. How your microbiome is developed. So sometimes it does go back to how you were born, your environment, your diet, genetics play a factor too, medications early on. All of those things really do impact somebody's gut health. The gluten intolerance, lactose intolerance, or yeah, gluten can be several different things. You can have a sensitivity, an allergy, and intolerance to it, and they're all different as far as your immune system is concerned. But to answer your question, why they're more susceptible to it, I don't know that I know really, and I'm not sure that anybody really does, other than we know that there have been impaired um, body functions in different ways. And it's hard to answer that question without really knowing what I'm talking about specifically. So I am being kind of general. But like if I'm talking about autism, for example, there's lots of research out there that says that people on the spectrum typically have more food sensitivities, allergies, impaired gut health in general. And in that respect, in that instance, I do feel like it's that gut-brain connection. It's very, very linked. And so the brain function, right, of people on the spectrum, it goes right back to gut health. I have a couple private patients, high functioning autism, and they've got some major digestive problems. And so we're working on their gut. So it's a really long explanation to say, like, no, I don't know. But yes, that often tends to be part of someone's experience with a disability. Yeah, I think it's complicated.
So if a child were having some issues with gluten or dairy, what is the best route to go? Do they immediately do an allergy panel? What's the best process to take?
So food allergy testing, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. You can do a blood test, you can do a skin prick test. Neither of them are very reliable, meaning let's say you the test comes out that you're sensitive to strawberries. It's the winter, there are not a lot of strawberries around, you haven't really been eating them, so you kind of wonder about that, and then you stop eating strawberries. The results can be influenced by so many different things, and when I say they're not reliable, it's that just because the test says that you're sensitive to strawberries doesn't really mean that you are. And so if somebody has a test already, like I'll take that as information and we'll work with it, but oftentimes the best thing is really just to try something, try a food. You do want to be really intentional about the foods that you're trying, and wanting to know if there's a reaction, right? There's a process that you go through, but that's the best way, is eating a food and waiting and watching for a reaction. So the tests, the food sensitivity allergy tests, I said that they're influenced by lots of different things. What they can be influenced by, either you not eating a lot of something or you are eating a lot of something. I've been eating a lot of peanuts. Well, so there's a lot of peanuts in my system. So that might come up on a food sensitivity test as just being high, because I'm eating a lot of them right now. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm sensitive to them. So it's not 100% accurate. I wish it was, but it's not. So if somebody asks me if they should do a food sensitivity test, that's what I tell them. You can, but they're not super reliable. Food diaries, tracking, those are a lot better at kind of sussing out what you do well with and what you don't.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Another question from another parent that's not here. She says, my son has IBS and we recently had an allergy panel done on him. Lots of environmental allergies, but no food allergies. Do you have any experience and advice for IBS in terms of diets?
So IBS is a diagnosis of non-diagnosis, essentially. So they've ruled everything else out. They're not really sure what it is. We call it IBS. And so it's very, there are some general recommendations. For example, low FODMAP foods tend to do well with people with IBS. But because it's so general, it can be very different one person to the next. So that's probably the most basic recommendation I would give for someone with IBS. But yeah, it varies.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question on the chat, and Taylor, you might have to help me a little bit. She says, every time when my mom eats every type of breads and when she comes stressed the next day, she'll be sick. I think it might be gluten-free, but she doesn't know. She's been writing down in a food diary what she's been eating, and that helps her not buy junk food. Sorry, Taylor. What's your question from that?
Just read it if you want me to.
Yeah.
I'll be to do that. Okay. So like every time when my mom eats like certain foods or like bread or pastas or anything like that situation, and when she feels stressed that day, the next day she will feel sick. And so I don't know what you do to help.
So is this is a question for your mom, not for you?
No. For my mom, yes, but for me, no.
Okay. Your mom eats bread and then she gets stressed and sick.
Yes.
Okay. So she's eating a lot of other things too. And without knowing all of the other things, it's hard for me to say, you know, whether or not bread is why she's feeling sick.
Okay.
Stress, we talked a little bit about this in the presentation. Stress really impacts our gut health and our digestion. So if she's feeling sick, sometimes the stress will cause that. So it's hard for me to answer and tell you exactly why she might be. I wouldn't know. I don't know enough to say whether or not she should go gluten-free based on the information you gave me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Is there another question in there?
so I have like maybe two left. So my other question is this. So I have a job coach and she's also gluten free, and I have a roommate and she is gluten free as well.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so I'll say that is one. And the second thing is so like from I'm gonna say this, it's kind of personal, but I want to say it.
Okay.
So I have been going to Salt Lake often, and I had to go get a echo done for myself. And now my doctor is giving me sheets of information about about no carbohydrates that I cannot eat daily, and so I've been not eating that. I have not been doing that. It's just I have to have a journal for me, and also I've been going to my brother's house to eat like healthy portion sizes meals, and I have to go there like 4 times a week and eat them, so I can get a reward. So I just have to ask my dad and get his permission that I can do DoorDash. To me about that is like I have to get his permission so I can eat healthy. So I can just eat healthy through Monday through Friday. And but on the weekends I have to ask for my dad to get a permission that I can do that on the weekday from the whole week of the week that I've been going to my brother's.
And so do you have a question for me about that? Or just something you wanted to share?
I just wanted to share that.
Okay. I think that sounds like a pretty good approach. The general rule I tell people is 80 to 90% of your diet should be healthy: fruits and vegetables, whole grains, protein, healthy fats. And then the 10% can be, the other 10% can be kind of, you know, I want people to live life and enjoy. So sometimes you might want ice cream. Sometimes you might have, you know, whatever your treat is. So.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we wrap up?
I have one.
Yeah.
I can't see. Okay. So I follow this nutritionist, and she has a kid with Down syndrome, and she recommends no sugar at all. Like even fruits, she says is bad for everybody, not just special need kids. It's just like it creates a spike in your brain, just the sugar in any form, like even fructose or all the different names. So she recommends pretty much no fruits also, which is weird for me. And I just wanted to know your opinion on that, if you agree. I know that everybody has their approaches, but I just wanted to hear your opinion on that.
So it sounds like I mean, this particular nutritionist is making recommendations for people with Down syndrome or everybody?
With special needs, like all kind of disabilities, special, like any kind of brain damage or yeah, I guess it's just disabilities in general, not specific for Down syndrome. But I do have a kid with Down syndrome too, and I kind of like I like her opinion. With this one, I'm just like debating if I should follow or not.
Yeah, so like my general take would be there are some reasons why I would recommend somebody not have any kind of sugar, even from fruit or whole grains, for example. Vegetables, by the way, they all break down into sugar. They're carbohydrates. But things like fruit, whole grains, and then all of the other things we think of when we think about carbohydrates, so bread and pasta and donuts and cupcakes, those obviously have, yeah, like a very high impact on our blood sugar, which causes all kinds of reactions. We could talk for another hour on the impacts of sugar. And there, like I say, there are some reasons why I would recommend that for some people. I would not across the board recommend that for people in general. Fruit, whole grains, beans, legumes, all of those are complex carbohydrates. They all have a higher impact on our blood sugar than other kinds of vegetables. But we are, so if I kind of go back to something that I touched on in the presentation, is that it's in the variety and diversity of our food that impacts the variety and diversity of the bacteria that are in our guts. So there are all kinds of reasons why I might want to like eliminate or avoid or narrow somebody's food choices, but I'm always thinking about like the most variety that somebody can have. And so I wouldn't want to exclude fruit, like I say, as like across the board or as a general recommendation. In my opinion, in the experience that I have, the education that I have, fruits are they're nutritious. They need to be moderated, but they're nutritious. So there might, like I say, there might be some specific reasons why I might say, oh, let's cut back on this. But in general, no. As part of like a balanced, healthy diet, they're good. Yeah, it's a good question. We could talk a whole lot more about sugar. Yeah. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Well, it looks like we're at our time. Thank you all for coming. And Emilie, we're so grateful for the advice that you've given us today and the answers to our questions. Thank you all so much for coming again, and we'll keep in touch. Thank you all.
Thanks for letting me be part of it.
Thanks, Emilie.
Bye.
Bye.